Hey guys, so good afternoon and welcome to Unacademy. I hope I'm audible and visible to all of you here. So we'll just wait for a few minutes for a few more people to join in and then we'll go on with the discussion, right? So here guys, we are going to take up a comprehensive discussion on the various current affairs, right? So this is mostly going to be a series. Let me just, get to the PDF here. Right, so this is going to be a series wherein we will be discussing about the current affairs. So we will be discussing current affairs comprehensively here, right? So what we'll do is we'll take them up monthly, right? So we'll take them, the monthly current affairs for this year, and that is how we'll go about discussing them, right? So this series essentially is for the current affairs roundup for the year 2021, right? Or 20 say 2021. So it is going to go on up from 2020 till 2021, right? So we are going to take up a discussion month wise. So here in this series over here that we've just begun right now, we will be covering current affairs from January till July, and then next month we will be covering current affairs from August till like October. Obviously, we won't be able to get in anything beyond that for then, right? So we'll start covering current affairs like that, right? Now, when we talk about the current affairs of the major happenings for like from January, so we'll have a list of different events that took place this year. So we'll just talk about that shortly. Before which, let me just give you a little introduction to one important thing here, that whenever we are talking about or whenever we are referring to, say for instance, anything with respect to anything that was whatever is relevant for prelims or mains, you must have noticed that of late there has been a change in the trend where a lot of questions mostly are being asked from just the current affairs portion, right? So that makes it very, very important, right? Why does that make it very important or relevant is the fact that a lot of different questions that are going to be asked in the examination are definitely going to be coming out of your either a static portion coupled with your current affairs will be asked, or maybe questions from current affairs are going to primarily be asked. So that is how this is going to progress here, right? So that is about it. Now let's go on and begin with the discussion as to what happened in the month of January. So I don't know whether like good or bad for you. So what happened this year was that there was a massive corona outbreak, right? So not many substantial things have happened or have been reported post March, right? So a few things here and there have happened at least up till the month of June and July. Zyada significant kuch hua nahi, right? But a lot of things did happen in the months of January and February. So we will be focusing our attention on those things out there, right? So we will definitely be taking them into account. Now let's might as well begin with the discussion here. So the first topic that we have to take up is green economy, right? So what exactly do we understand by green economy? What is it? Why is it important? And like what had happened with respect to this, right? So आपने देखा होगा, like if you would have followed the newspapers in the month of January, so what had happened was like there was this economist who got the Tyler Prize, right? So what happened was that renowned environmental economist Pawan Sukhdev, right, was awarded the 2020 Tyler Prize for his work in the domain of green economy, right? So this was there. Now this brings us to a few important aspects like what is the Tyler Prize and what is the green economy, right? So let's try and understand the same here. So, as per the United Nations Environment Programme, green economy is the one that improves human well-being and builds social equity, right? Human well-being first component, social equity being the second component, while significantly reducing environmental risks and ecological sacrifices, right? So not only this much, it is also going to have certain environmental concerns that it will be addressing. So it will be environmentally or eco-friendly as well, right? So all these things are there, right? Now, what has happened is it has emerged as an alternative to today's dominant economic model, which exacerbates inequalities, encourages waste, triggers resource sacrifices, and generates scarcities and generates widespread threats to the environment as well as human health, right? So that is there. Now, on similar lines, if you guys would remember, there was a Green New Deal concept that was floated in America, right? Now, what was that American New Green Deal that, like Green New Deal that was basically, floated across? सो उसमें क्या कर रहे थे ये लोग सो इट वाज आपने सुना होगा न्यू डील रूजवेल्ट प्रेसिडेंट रूजवेल्ट इज एसोसिएटेड विद द न्यू डील राइट so New Deal was basically related to, or New Deal was basically talking about what? It was referring to the economic reforms in the society, right? Now, when we talk about the Green New Deal में difference क्या है? How is the Green New Deal going to be different here? Green New Deal is different in the sense that a lot of aspects with respect to your, different things like your say for instance economic aspects coupled with your environmental aspects are going to come forward, right? So now it is basically going towards a sustainable approach, right? So ab hum kya hai? We are all talking about sustainability. I'm pretty sure you guys must have heard about sustainable development goals. किसने sustainable development goals के बारे में सुना है? How many of you know about sustainable development goals, guys? किसको पता है already? पता है so basically there are 17 sustainable development goals, right, which are very very important to ensure a proper as well as a, like say for instance, a proper development all across the globe, right? Sustainable development all across the globe, right? So उसमें हमारे पास 17 different principles आते हैं. उसी में से whenever we are going to talk about different areas or different arenas, and when we will be discussing or whenever we are going to take that into account wherein environmental sustainability is going to be brought about, that is what we understand by your green economy or sustainable development here, right? So I think now it's slightly clear. तो जब आप अपने इकोनॉमिक कंसर्न्स को environmental concerns के साथ लेकर चलते हो, right? When you're going to put both of them together, that is what we understand by your sustainable development, and that is how the green economy can be achieved, right? Green economy क्यों? Because it is going to be economic growth, there is going to be social equity, as well as we are not harming the environment in any way, right? So we are not harming the environment, and the environment sustainability is definitely there, right? Is this clear to everyone now? Has everybody understood this much? बात समझ में आई? So I hope green economy portion is clear. Now, what exactly is the intention behind this? So it aims to transition economy that is a low carbon, resilient, like resource efficient and socially inclusive economy, right? And it is based on the idea of qualitative growth, very important, where low carbon and environmentally friendly technologies as well as international cooperation play a key role, right? So that is what is very, very important as far as the green economy aspect is concerned, right? So that is about it. Now going on further with the discussion of green economy only. So Pawan Sukhdev, that is the person who was awarded the Tyler Prize. So his groundbreaking report, or his groundbreaking 2008 report on the economics of environment and biodiversity was hosted by the United Nations Environment Program, and that actually became one of the foundations upon which the green economy movement was based, right? So that is exactly what it was based upon, and that is exactly how it came into being, right? So that is very important here. Right, so that happened with this one over here. Now what happened was that the transition towards green economy or towards a global green economy has global significance and importance, but it is the most significant, or it is more significant for developing countries like India, where it is associated with benefits and costs, right? Another important thing was that when we talk about green economy for a country like India, so we are saying that India is still a developing country. It's not all that developed. Now we all know that all the developed countries stand on a a huge platform as what they have constructed for themselves today, but it has come at a cost. Developed countries ने इतने carbon emissions करे हैं, they have been so what do we say, polluting of the environment and all resources and aspects. So that is what has happened there, right? So वो सारे issues come into picture when we talk about your developed countries, seeing where they have reached, right? Now, when we compare the same to, or when we assess the same with respect to the developing countries, they are yet to develop or they are yet to achieve those peaks here, right? So, how will they be achieving these peaks over here? How is that going to come about? कैसे होगा ये? So, for this, what is going to be the difference overall is the fact that when we are talking about developing countries, if they will look into the aspect of sustainability from the very beginning, right from the very beginning, as in the present stages as well, if the developing countries are going to focus upon sustainability, that is going to change or bring about a paradigm shift, right? Developed countries went across with development ruthlessly. They did not pay any attention as to what repercussions the environment will have and all those things there, right? उनको उससे कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ रहा था. They went forward with what they would have otherwise also just followed suit with, right? So that is what happened there. Now, when we talk about the green economy issue here, the green economy has been different in that respect here, that they have been developing, right? But you are doing it in a sustainable way so that the earth and the ecosystem are not harmed. They are still going to be intact, right? So that is going to be there. Hi Gokul, welcome to the session. Absolutely correct. So when we speak about the developing countries, or rather the developed countries first, so if we talk about the developed countries, there were like waves of industrial revolution that came about in Europe as well as US, right? So when we talk about that portion of the world, it had huge waves of industrialization and all those things, and that is basically what had brought about the development there. Now countries like India, so those countries have burnt so much coal and all those things, but countries like India, which are yet to develop, what are they doing? Instead of burning coal and emitting all those all the huge amounts of carbon out there, we are resorting to greener technologies. We want to follow suit, or we want to go forward with your sustainable technologies, like say for instance your hydropower and wind energy and all those things, right? So that is how it's different for the developing countries, and this is all because of the fact that the realization of environment sustainability and peaceful coexistence has been emphasized upon, right? That is there. Now going on further, talking about the Tyler Prize for Environmental Achievement. Now, because it was also in the news, maybe a state PSC or UPSC for that matter might ask questions from here, right? So, the Tyler Prize for Environmental Achievements was established in the year 1973, right? Not too long ago, right? It is one of the oldest international environmental awards, recognizing individuals who have contributed in an outstanding manner to the scientific knowledge and public leadership to preserve and enhance the global environment, right? So that is pretty much why the Tyler Prize is accorded. Its recipients encompass the spectrum of environmental concern, including environmental policy making, health, air and water pollution, ecosystem disruption, and loss of biodiversity and energy resources, right? So all these things are also a part of it here. It is awarded by the International Tyler Prize Executive Committee. Now this is important कि कहाँ पर है? With the administrative support of the University of Southern California, right? So this is how it is functioning here, right? So that was about it. If you ever get a question on environmental sustainability or green economy, or the Green New Deal and other such related aspects, make sure you make it a point to mention about the Tyler Prize as well as its recent recipient, that is your like the environmental economist Pavan Sukhdev, right? So please make sure you guys mention this thing, right? So I hope this is clear to everyone here. Now talking about the like the report that was there, that is TEEB, that is the Economics of Environment and Biodiversity, right? So what was talked about in the report? What was the report all about, right? So TEEB is a global initiative focused on making nature's values visible, right? So आप जैसे हम ecosystem services बोलते हैं या फिर consumptive value and all the values that we have from nature, right? So its principal objective here is to mainstream the values of biodiversity and ecosystem services into decision making at all levels, right? So that is about it. In October 2010, it released its report, that is Mainstreaming the Economics of Nature, a synthesis of the approach, conclusions, and recommendations of TEEP, right? And it launched the Bank of Natural Capital to communicate its findings to the general public here, right? Now, there are three core principles which are a part of it. So, what principles are there? First of all, recognizing value in ecosystems that can sometimes ensure conservation and sustainable use. For example, the existence of sacred groves in some cultures, which are also an in situ conservation technique. And it has helped to protect natural areas and the biodiversity they contain, right? So, that is how it's functioning here. Then, secondly, it also emphasizes upon demonstrating the value in economic terms is often useful for policymakers and other such businesses in reaching decisions that consider the full costs and benefits of an ecosystem, right? So, सारी चीज़ों को account for करेंगे. Example by the including the cost and benefit of conserving the ecosystem services provided by the wetlands in controlling floods compared to building flood defenses. So there are so many things that are naturally given to us when we speak about ecosystem services. If we were to actually account for that and actually get doing all those things, it will be a very expensive affair and a very difficult job as well, right? So what are we instead focusing upon? Let nature only do it, and let's safeguard nature to that extent that any of its functions are not disrupted in between, right? So that is what we understand when we speak of those things here. Is this clear to everyone? समझ में आया? Is this clear now? All right. Now, when we speak about another aspect of whenever we are talking about issues related to, or when we are talking about aspects related to the ecosystem services, always remember that it is important to acknowledge the fact that whenever we are talking about your various ecosystem services, there are so many things. Like, for example, आपने अभी news में भी देखा होगा, so many different floods and all those things have been coming out, right? So बहुत सारे floods और वो सब आए थे of late, right? So even when all those floods and all those things like cyclones and floods were coming out and they were impacting various areas, we have definitely noticed the fact that of late a lot of differences were there, right? As compared to the damage that took place, right? So जो डैमेज जितना हो सकता था या जितना डैमेज हुआ है उसका क्वांटम तो काफी कम था, right? So that is very very important here, right? So please take care or take note of the same here that the damage has also come down because of such reservoirs being present, right? So जैसे जैसे जहाँ पर हम लोग बात करते हैं कि जहाँ पर भी like whenever we speak of like you know a belt of mangroves or other trees present, right? It is definitely going to bring down the quantum of your just a moment, guys. All right. So I thought there was a disconnection in between, but I don't think so. It's working. All right. Anyway, so when we talk about the damage that recent floods and cyclones have brought about, we see that there is a huge difference out there, right? So we see and we notice that there has been a huge difference that we have realized, or that has been there with respect to or with the aspect of so many things out there, right? So say for instance, we talk about the differences, or the kind of damage that was like avoided because of so many trees and mangrove forests being present. So that is certainly a difference out there, right? So otherwise that would have been very, very detrimental, but that it has not been of late, right? So that is there. Now, thirdly, we talk about capturing value involves the introduction of mechanisms that incorporate the values of ecosystems into decision making through incentives and price signals, right? That can include payments for ecosystem services, reforming environmentally harmful subsidies, or including tax breaks for conservation, right? So all those things are there. I hope the concept associated with economic assessment of ecosystem services is clear. So जहाँ पर आपके different mangroves and all those forests are present, they are going to be very, very instrumental in bringing down the quantum of your see for instance the kind of destruction of habitat and all those things that would have occurred, right? So they are doing that naturally free of cost. Now if we have to instead build upon a in like a particular embankment somewhere, right? So suppose करो हम कहीं पर embankment बनाते हैं खुद से जाकर, that is going to be very, very like expensive in terms of cost effectiveness, right? So that is going to cause a little problem out there, right? So that is about it. Now, talking about the aspect as to why do we need green economy, like what is the purpose of green economy? Why do we need one, right? Green economy की ज़रूरत क्या है हमें? So existing economy is premised on some serious flawed assumptions as पहला है humans have the right to exploit nature, right? So they have always thought here, they usually think and they've always thought for quite some time that they are like absolutely, the people who are, in some way entitled to it, which is not true. Then the wealth and growth can be measured as GDP alone, whereas most people seek many kinds of wealth and balance one against the another in the decisions that they make, right? So that is another important aspect. Then economic growth has come at the expense of environment. Very sure. The Industrial Revolution has helped in the rise of GDP and provided the livelihood for many people. However, global warming and environmental degradation has an impact on almost everyone, right? So that is there. Then the poor people, when we speak of that, they are the most vulnerable, right? They are the most vulnerable to the consequences of climate terms like change in terms of the violent weather and floods that they might have to experience, right, as a result of the same. Then green economy can bring resilience to climate change as it is basically an amalgamation of all the processes and services which helps towards minimizing environmental degradation, right? So that is also there. Then green economy will place a value on nature through taxation and other means of regulation, right? So that is there. It will seek to maximize natural capital, so capital and intellectual capital, as well as the aspect of financial capital will be taken into account, right? So, are you understanding? So, it will seek to maximize the natural capital, social capital, and intellectual capital, as well as the financial capital that will also be incorporated in here, right? So, all these things are going to very well be accounted for over here, right? So, that is about it. Now, obviously, realizing the green economy is not something that is very, very easy. It's not going to happen in the blink of an eye, and it definitely is not all that easy as to what we are seeing or what different kinds of your, trends and patterns we are able to observe of late, right? So when we speak of that, so challenges की जब हम लोग बात करते हैं, it might slow down the economic development during the first few years and negatively impact poverty production programs and industrial growth, right? So those kind of problems are surely there. Such a shift requires such a shift from all these things requires the necessary infrastructure and adequate time as well to be implemented, which is certainly lacking, right? Changing market focus of countries' main industries here may lead to job losses in industries seen as not environmentally friendly, such as coal mining. Huge cost to government in the form of subsidies to promote production and use of energy efficient green products is also there. Furthermore, lack of know-how regarding green technology and availability of related skills is also there. Furthermore, developed countries may exploit green economy model using their technological advantage and environment to gain the market access, right? Developed countries have resources to provide their firms with subsidies for research and development on low carbon technologies. So basically, the developing countries are, at a loss here because ना तो उनके पास कोई option है in terms of, more breakthrough technologies and more resources that they can dispose. And certainly, in order to achieve environmental sustainability, they can't even grow as rapidly as the developed countries have at the cost of environment, right? So that is a problematic situation and an undue disadvantage to the developing countries, right? Obviously अगर उनके पास इतने resources नहीं, so how can you expect them or how can you actually anticipate that they will be able to, or that's unfair to expect out of them that they will be in any way getting to, or they will in any way be responsible for like adapting or taking up new technologies, right? So that is not correct, right? That is uncalled for here. All right. Now, going on further, coming to the next one here, when we speak about developing countries, so developing countries may be unable to meet the required environmental standards on their product exports as well, affecting their economic development. So, basically, because of the various things that the developing countries essentially lack, they are being treated as, or they are being subjected as a disadvantaged group, right? So there are so many things that they are not definitely either a part of or have access to. So that is how they are basically not faring too well over here, right? Is that clear to everyone? Has everybody understood the same? All right. Now, going on further, coming to the next aspect with respect to what steps or what are the various steps that India has taken on green economy, very important from the means aspect as well. So, India has also many countries have floated their INDCs, and so has India. So, India has basically floated or put forward its intention, or to be a better aspect or the flag bearer of reducing the impact of greenhouse gases on climate change by putting forward its intended nationally determined contributions, right? What are the nationally determined contributions here? These are the INDCs. So I hope you guys are aware about the Paris agreement that was in place, right? So उसी के relation में your INDCs have also been structured, right? Then the National Action Plan on Climate Change, along with the State Action Plan on Climate Change, all these things seek to mainstream climate in development processes at the national and state levels, right? Furthermore, the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change recognized green growth in its vision. All right, so those kind of SOPs are also being given by various different, governments to people, wherein they are taking care of any kinds of requirements or needs in terms of, how good or bad they are doing environmentally, right? So that is there. Then when we speak about the next aspect here, so the 14th Finance Commission, this is the one that I just explained, they have put in different kinds of, incentive based grants for your environmentally sustainable development, or, concerted efforts to bring about environmentally sustainable development and all those things. Now, the practice is continued again by the 15th Finance Commission, and it's further enhanced the weightage assigned to the forest cover. Also, please note that the Government of India has a renewable energy capacity target of 175 gigawatts by the year 2022, right? It has also been further enhanced, right? So, further enhancements have been done in this, right? Now, let's come to the next very burning topic from the current affairs for the month of January, and quite literally burning was the Australian bushfire, right? Now we all know that, like I'll give you a little brief to this. Now, when we talk about or when we speak about the grasses, right? The grasses are or they are very, very capable of drying up during the summers, right? And sometimes what happens when there is extreme drying of the grasses in certain areas, so constant brushing against other particles can trigger a lot of heat and ultimately lead to forest fires or bushfires here, right? So basically, when we talk about the Australian bushfire that took place or broke out on a very massive scale here, so they are basically like grass fires. जैसे forest fires होती है इंडिया में, यहाँ पर grass fires हुई हैं. Now, since the Australian continent is semi-arid, we see that there is a huge desert in the very central portion here. It has a large expanse of grasslands which provide ready-made material for large fires. Although the 2019 bushfire has been exceptional in its devastation that it has caused, it is a common phenomenon in Australia since thousands of years, right? They have burned down 1 lakh square kilometers of land in Australia in 2019. If one studies the natural ecosystem of Australian continent, it is easy to gauge the impact of bushfires in overall evolution, right? That is there. Going on further, talking about the characteristics of bushfires. So when we speak about the speed of movement, their speed is way much more higher than forest fires, right? Because जब भी आपकी ये bushfires break out करती है, it's usually very very hot, and the entire grass has more or less dried up and stuff like that. So what happens as a result of that is that there is going to be an immense breakout of fire that is going to ultimately get channelized or happen over here. So when we speak about the characteristics of bushfires, their speed is higher than that of forest fires, right? Speaking of the heat output, so which allows them to smolder for a few days and weeks after the fire has crossed a location. This ensures that the impact of fires is felt at a location for a very long period of time, for a very long span of time, right? What are the various causes for bushfires? So the basic cause for massive bushfires is the presence of hot and dry conditions over a long time scale, right? That is there. Also, the main factor which leads to creation of such conditions is the Indian Ocean dipole, which creates exceptionally dry conditions, that is low rainfall and high aridity, and abnormally high temperatures, that is the positive temperature anomaly here, right? The actual trigger for the breakout of bushfires is provided by arson or the lightning strike, right? So that is there. Now, how bushfires create their own weather systems, this is important, can also be an important mains question for that matter. So please make sure you guys understand this point here, right? So intense fires generate a lot of smoke. Obviously, आग लगी है तो smoke तो आएगी, right? But their heat can also create a localized updraft, right? ऊपर को ऐसे आएगा, which will be powerful enough to create its own changes in the atmosphere above, right? So आप देखो यहाँ पर क्या हो रहा है, एक जगह पर आग लगी है, उसकी वजह से धुआं धुआं आ रहा है, and it will ultimately trigger cloud formation, right? Now this is what is going to happen. Now problem क्या होती है, जैसे यहाँ पर bushfire है, right? And as we have just read that lightning can also trigger the same, right? So we know that lightnings can trigger bushfires. तो अब इसमें होगा क्या, like मैं आपको अगर overall समझाऊँ, तो अगर कहीं पर bushfire है and it is creating its own weather system here, so it will bring about a lot of rainfall accompanied by lightning and thunderstorms. And sometimes what happens, this lightning that falls upon somewhere else can be the reason for the starting of a new fire, right? So it can at times lead to the formation of a new fire over here, right? So that is how it's slightly problematic for all of us to take cognizance of. So what happens is intense fires generate smoke, obviously, and but the heat can also create a localized updraft which is powerful enough to create its own challenges in the atmosphere, or not challenges but changes in the atmosphere above, right? Now as the heat and smoke rise, the cloud plume can actually cool off, generating a large puffy cloud full of potential rain. The plume can also scatter embers of and hot ash over a wider area, like पूरे area में, and eventually water droplets in the cloud condense, generating a downburst of rain, right? But in the front, between the calm outside the air fire zone and like a pyrocumulonimbus storm cloud is so sharp that it also generates lightning and can also start new fire. So are you understanding क्या हो रहा है यहाँ पर? Originally तो जो fire है उसकी वजह से cloud form हुआ. There might be lightning in another area, which will be the trigger for another forest fire to break out from here. Right? So that is what happens here. Now, what are the various impacts of bushfires? So, bushfires की वजह से क्या-क्या issues या क्या-क्या impacts हमें देखने को मिले? So, you must have noticed that there are a lot of physical impacts, there are ongoing, ecological and biodiversity impacts, and obviously public health menace तो वो है ही. राइट. सो जब हम लोग फिजिकल और डायरेक्ट इम्पैक्ट्स की बात करते हैं, सो ओवर 18 मिलियन हेक्टेयर्स ऑफ लैंड, दैट इज अ ह्यूज क्वांटम ऑफ लैंड, हैज burned in the Australian bushfire in the season between 2019 and 20 as of mid-January, according to the media reports, destroying over about 5,900 buildings, including about 2,800 homes, right? And in addition to human fatalities, many and millions of animals have been killed like in this fire. आप लोग ने देखा भी होगा, there were so many articles in the newspapers which were showing your, injured kangaroos or burnt up koala bears, right? So you must have noticed that, right? So all those things are also happening as a result of the same, right? So all those impacts have also been noticed or witnessed over here, right? Now, when we speak of it, like when we speak about such things over here, there is another very important aspect that we need to take into account, which is what? Which is ongoing ecological and biological diversity impacts, right? So, उसमें हमारे पास क्या है? What is going to be there? So, please note that an estimated billion animals, right? A billion, which is a huge number, and many more bats and insects are likely to die in total overall in the coming weeks and months as a result of the lost habitat and food sources, right? So ऐसा नहीं है कि it is going to be having a little temporary impact that it did have at that point of time or at that juncture, but following that, it is also going to trigger another chain of events which is going to be further more problematic, right? Obviously, because habitat destruction has taken place, because a lot of animals have died. So what is going to happen is definitely that is going to trigger, issues with respect to survival of species, in terms of habitat that is there, in terms of food sources that are available. So that is definitely going to show its impact in the times to come, right? That is definitely going to be a cause of concern here, right? Not just this, it will also be reflecting in other things in terms of how, like when we talk about the public health, right? So smoke and ash content, when it had, increased to a certain level over here, so smoke and ash content in the air led to the worst air quality in major cities across Australia. The effects of smoke exposure and inhalation range from eye and respiratory tract irritation to more serious disorders, including reduced lung functioning, bronchitis in certain people, exacerbated asthma, and also premature death in certain cases, right? According to the World Health Organization, older people and people with, like, the ones who already had certain chronic illnesses or certain complications out there. So people with your cardiorespiratory diseases or chronic illnesses, like children and other people who work outdoors, are particularly vulnerable, right? So those people are actually at a very high risk category here. Now talking about the impacts of bushfires, so the impacts of fires crosses borders, right? Smoke from wildfires can travel great distances. It is often pushed into the stratosphere by heat from fires. Smoke from bushfires in Australia has basically drifted across the Pacific and may have reached the Antarctic according to the World Meteorological Organization. This has led to the hazardous air quality in major cities throughout Australia and has affected New Zealand and cities in South America after smoke reached both Argentina and Chile, right? Speaking of the mental health cause here, so fire do not, like fires mostly that are there, do not cause physical harm. Many people experience mental trauma from the experience of emergency evacuation and losing homes, pets, belongings, livestock, and other sources of livelihoods, right? talking about the economic cost, the economic or the actual economic cost of these bushfires is still being analyzed, but it's clear that infrastructure has damaged and that impacts extend to industries such as farming and tourism. Some businesses and institutions have been forced to close their doors during periods of excessive levels of air pollution, right? So that is something that has also occurred or in or during that time frame, right? So that is also something that has happened in or during that time frame here, right? So that is about. All right. Going on further, talking about the other impacts. So now this one is very, very important. That is climate feedback loops that have come in picture, as well as reduction in carbon stocks. Please make sure if you're writing the mains this year, you do mention these points because they are very, very important. So the bushfires have not only been made more likely and intense by climate change, they also add to it, right? How do they add to it is something that is referred to as the climate feedback loop, right? So until 2019-20 Australian bushfire season, the forests in Australia were thought to reabsorb all the carbon released in bushfires across the country. This would mean that the forests achieve net zero emissions, right? However, global warming is making bushfires burn more intensely and frequently, right? So मतलब क्या हो रहा है जितना वो ऑब्जर्व जितना वो कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड absorb कर रहे हैं एनवायरनमेंट से if it all comes to burning out, what is going to happen? Intense burning is going to take place. Intense burning की वजह से क्या होगा? उतना ही कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड जितना absorb हुआ है will get released back, right? So because of this, like if we talk about this, what has happened and how it has happened here is that as a result or repercussions of all these things over here, what have we noted that basically like if I'm to read from however global warming is making bushfires burn more intensely and frequently, and the 2019-20 bushfires have already emitted about 400 megatons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere according to the Copernicus monitoring program. This is as much as Australia's average annual carbon dioxide emissions in just the past 3 months. These will increase Australia's annual greenhouse gas emissions, contributing to global warming and heighten the likelihood of recurring mega fires that will release yet more emissions, right? This is a deeply concerning climate feedback loop, right? So this is how it's like becoming a vicious cycle at the end of the day, right? So how are we going to get out of it, right? So that is that. Now talking about the varied agricultural impact. So the bushfires have scorched the pastures, they have destroyed livestock, they have raised vineyards, and with regrowth and recovery likely to stretch these water resources already challenged by the drought, right? So what has happened is that a lot of aspects with respect to like problems actually associated with these kind of things have actually surfaced here, right? Now, reports indicate that the country's dairy supply will be like the worst hit by the this situation here because they don't have proper water because of the extreme droughts here. They do not have good amount of grasses to feed upon. So obviously, all in all, it's going to bring about like a negative impact or a negative feedback here, right? So this was your Australian bushfire, very, very important. I think we'll be able to take up another topic here that is going to be your smog towers, and then I might as well take up the coastal regulation zone as well. Now speaking about smog towers, right, so Delhi gets its first tower to tackle pollution. So Delhi is one place in the country which is like almost the hub or the epitome of like polluted air and all those things, right? Excuse me. Right. So that is something that Delhi is mostly regarded as now, right? So smoke towers are structured designs to work as large-scale air purifiers. These air purifiers shall draw in the air through fans installed at the top before passing it through the filters and releasing it near the ground, right? The filters installed in the tower will use carbon nanofibers as a major component and will focus on reducing particulate matter load as well, right? Then, furthermore, the Supreme Court has directed the centre and the Delhi government to prepare a plan to install smog towers across the capital to deal with air pollution. Right? Furthermore, the 100-meter Xi'an Tower in China, which is dubbed as the world's largest, has reportedly brought down the PM 2.5 particulate pollutants over there by 19% in an area of like around 6 kilometers in its vicinity. So if it's worked there, it's definitely going to bring down the air pollution content in India as well, right? So that is about it. Now, coming to the next important thing here, that is the coastal regulation zone and the blue flag certification in consonance with that, right? So, I'm pretty sure you guys must have heard about that certain beaches are going to get blue flag certification, right? That was what was doing the rounds. To begin with, it was Chandrabhaga Beach from Odisha, which was the first one to get certified likewise, right? So the Environment Ministry has relaxed the coastal regulation zone rules that restrict construction near beaches to help states construct infrastructure and enable them to receive blue flag certification, right? So that is important. Now, speaking about the blue flag certification here, how is it important? So, it like the beach is basically it's there to create certain infrastructure. So, beaches have to create certain infrastructure over there, like portable toilets for people, grey water treatment plants, right? A solar power plant, seating facilities, CCTV surveillance, and similar different amenities and what do we say services that they have to provide. And the certification here is accorded by the Denmark-based Foundation for Environmental Education with 33 stringent criteria under four major heads for the beaches, that is environmental education and information, bathing water quality, environmental management and conservation, and safety and services, right? So these four things have to be very well connoted over here, right? Please note that the Blue Flag Beach is an ecotourism model and marks out beaches as providing tourists and beachgoers clean and hygienic bathing water, facilities and amenities, a safe and healthy environment, and sustainable development of the overall area here, right? So that is there. Now talking about the coastal regulation zone here. So CRZs have been classified into four zones for the purpose of regulation. Which four zones are there? So CRZ1 की अगर हम लोग बात करें, it includes ecologically sensitive areas where no construction is allowed except activities for atomic power plants and defense, right? So that one is there. Then we talk about the CRZ2, right? उसमें क्या है? It includes designated urban areas that are substantially built up, right? And construction activities are to a certain extent allowed, but only on the landward side, right? That is there. Then we speak about the CRZ3. Usme kya hai? It includes relatively undisturbed areas that are there, many rural areas, and no new construction of buildings is allowed in this zone except repairing of the existing ones, right? However, construction of dwelling units in the plot area lying between 200 to 500 meters of the high tide line is somewhat allowed, right? Going further, speaking about CRZ4, it includes the water area covered between the low tide line and 12 nautical miles, which is going to be seaward, except for fishing and related activities. All actions impugning on the sea and tidal water will be regulated in this zone itself, right? So that is about it. Lastly, talking about the restoration, right? So how is the restoration work going to be carried out here if we look at it over here? So the Zoological Survey of India, with help from Gujarat's Forest Department, is attempting for the first time ever, to get to a process to restore coral reefs using the bio-rock technologies, right? Very, very important, can be important for both prelims as well as mains, right? A bio-rock structure was installed 1 nautical mile off the Mithapur coast in the Gulf of Kutch, right? Please note that coral reefs are one of the most biologically diverse marine ecosystems on the earth, right? Ecologically, coral reefs are important because they are the counterpart of the tropical rainforest in terms of species diversity and biological productivity in the ocean, right? Coral reefs enables the formation of associated systems or ecosystems which allow for the formation of essential habitats, fisheries and livelihoods, right? In addition, coral reefs are climatologically important because they provide an accurate long-term record of the climate change, and they help in extending our knowledge of seasonal climate variability in many remote tropical oceans, right? In India, coral reefs are present in the areas of Gulf of Kutch, Mannar, Andaman and Nicobar, Lakshadweep, Malwa and Maharashtra. There are a lot of coral reefs in India, right? India has all of those. Like India has patch reefs, India has fringing reefs, as well as your coral atolls, as in case of Lakshadweep, right? Now, coastal restoration, you can just see as to coral restoration kahan par hai. So this is all shown here, talking about the threats that it is looming under. Natural भी है, anthropogenic भी है. Natural threats की अगर हम बात करें तो क्या क्या है? Environmental threats हैं, temperature related threats हैं, sediment deposition, salinity, pH, right? Anthropogenic threats की अगर हम लोग बात करें, mining, bottom fishing, tourism, pollution, etc. Right? All these things are going to make the difference, right? Now, speaking about coral bleaching over here, so what is so important with respect to coral bleaching? Now, I hope you guys are all aware of the fact that coral reefs are basically aggregations of coral polyps and small algae, that is zooxanthellae, living there, right? Now, the color to the corals are white in color. They are calcareous aggregate. Like they are like coral reef is basically formed as a result of the calcareous, depositions that the polyps will be releasing, right? So that is how the reef is going to form. So coral bleaching occurs when coral polyps expel algae that live inside their tissues, right? And coral species live within a relatively narrow temperature margin, and hence low and high sea temperatures can induce coral bleaching, right? Now, when corals are exposed to high concentrations of chemical contaminants or pathogens, coral bleaching basically occurs or happens on a very wide scale, right? So that is going to happen then, right? Now, speaking of coral bleaching, exactly how it follows suit here. So, some of the common factors behind coral bleaching are, पहले तो होता है runoff that is coming in from agricultural lands or chemical pollution that is aggregating there. Destructive fishing and boating practices are there. Marine pollution is there. Uncontrolled tourism activities are there. Coastal constructions are there. Introduction of invasive species is one of the biggest problems. Coral mining is there. Ocean acidification is there. So all these issues and problems are very well there, right? So these kind of issues do trigger and cause problems with respect to coral bleaching, right? Now, talking about the consequences of the same. So, what are the various consequences of coral bleaching? So, first of all, it will impact the marine ecosystem, right? It will, because it is one of the most biodiverse area there, productive as well. Then, coral reefs are also going to act in the capacity of natural barriers, right? So, कहीं पर अगर कोई cyclone या tsunami आए, तो ये उसकी intensity को break करके कम कर देते हैं. It dampens the intensity, right? So, it's a natural barrier. Furthermore, without the coral reefs, right, the productivity comes down. That means that the oceans will not be able to absorb as much of carbon dioxide that they were previously or originally absorbing, right? Also, loss of coral reefs will have a devastating impact on the tropical countries, economies, food supplies, and safety of their coastal communities as well, right? So, all these issues will or definitely surface accordingly with respect to coral bleaching, right? So that is there. Now talking about the global measures for coral restoration, right? When we speak about that, so इसमें क्या कर रहे हैं हम? So चैप्टर 17 ऑफ एजेंडा 21 जो है अनक्लॉज में बहुत क्लियरली बताते हैं कि क्या करना है, हाउ यू कैन गो अबाउट द प्रोटेक्शन एंड सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट ऑफ ऑल दीज मरीन कोस्टल एरियाज, राइट? दैट हैज बीन explained like very explicitly out there. Then International Coral Reef Initiative is there, which is an informal partnership between nations and organizations which basically strives to preserve the coral reefs and related ecosystems all around the world, right? Then UNEP or rather UNWC over here. So जब ये दोनों साथ में काम करते, that is UNEP WCMC, that is United Nations Environment World Conservation Monitoring Center, right? That is also functioning or working in this direction only, right? So how does it go about working here? It works with scientists as well as your policy makers, जितने भी लोग हैं वहाँ पर worldwide, so as to discuss all these things and also to me like basically or like basically biodiversity concerns go, it basically advocates for their rights and all those things. So it works to place biodiversity at the very heart or center of environment and development decision making, to enable enlightened or choices that are there for people and the planet, right? So those kind of works are going to be undertaken by this over here, right? So that is there. Lastly, coming to the discussion related to the measures taken in India, so government of India has also taken up a couple of measures here to protect, to protect its coral reefs under the coastal ocean monitoring and prediction system. So land ocean interactions in coastal zones and integrated coastal marine area management is doing the rounds. Government of India has notified the CRZ and other areas, and has set up National Coastal Zone Management Authority and State Coastal Zone Management Authority to protect the coral reefs, right? Coral bleaching alert system is a service initiated from the INCOIS, uses the satellite derived sea surface temperatures in order to assess the thermal stress accumulated in the coral environments, right? Then Coral Recovery Project is basically a joint venture of the Wildlife Trust of India and the Gujarat Forest Department, supported by the Tata Chemicals Limited, right? Then Reef Watch India is basically an NGO that has taken up two projects. So Reef Build and Reef Grow, basically there to conserve the reefs, right? Reef build involves the restoration and restoring and rehabilitation of the coral reefs, and Andaman and like all these areas have actually been with, like, benefiting from this, right? So at the Andaman over here, by rescuing naturally broken coral fragments that would otherwise just, get here and there and just die, and they'll get smothered in the sand and just be of no use, right? And they are putting them back or reattaching them to the robust substratum, right? So those ways, different kinds of your restoration works are going on. And guys, it's important to realize, it's imperative to realize here that the coral reefs are a very important component of our ecosystem, are a very important habitat in the like the biodiversity scenario. They have a couple of ecosystem services, a lot of functions to discharge. So it is in our best interest to actually be conserving them at all costs, right? So I'm about to end the class here now, guys. So before we just sum up today, just quickly giving you a brief overview. Today we have read about few different topics wherein we've spoken about your like the green economy, right? The TEEB and the like the Tyler Prize. Then we've also discussed about the Australian bushfire. Very importantly, the climate feedback mechanism that goes on with it, right? That part we have discussed. We have also discussed about the various smog towers that have come up in Delhi. So India has got its first one now, right? Then we've also talked about the coastal regulation zone and the blue flag certification and the coral bleaching scenarios, right? So these are the few topics that we have discussed at length today. Tomorrow we will begin the discussion from the state of forests in India, the report that has come out. It's a like annual report done every 2 years, right? So that is how it's going to be done here, right? So we'll start with the state of forests in India tomorrow. After that, we'll go on and talk about the aspects related to the like the 10 new Ramsar sites that have just been added, right? So we'll talk about those Ramsar sites at length in detail. We'll talk about those Ramsar sites that have just been added here. And then we'll talk about the HCFC 141B. So uska complete phase out ho chuka hai. We have to talk about that. We'll discuss briefly about the urban lakes, right? African cheetah, because it was very important, it was in the news, so we'll talk about that as well. And then we'll talk about the green credit scheme that is there, and that is pretty much about it, right? So that is all of what we have to discuss for tomorrow, right? So we will take up this part of the discussion tomorrow, guys, right? So today we'll end the discussion here itself, right? So thank you so much for attending this session here, guys. I hope you guys have understood everything clearly. In case you still have any doubts, feel free to reach out to me, right? You can also ask me whatever doubts you have in class tomorrow, right? So that will be all about it for today, guys. I hope everything is clear, right? So study well, revise well, and take care. And I hope you guys have a great